little shower, so the weeds would come on like crazy, and so the farmers, rather than work the ground anymore to cause it to be stirred up anymore, they would hire guys to go out and hoe those big old fields of a mile around, you know, one field a mile around, get out there with a hoe.
Wow.
It seemed ridiculous, but we would hoe those weeds so it wouldn't cause the ground to be more loose than what it was. And so that was kind of the way we grew up, and we would harvest when we did get a little bit, and if we got 1 bushel an acre, we thought we were doing well. And now it's nothing that's strange at all for those farmers to get 60 bushels to an acre. And so that was my life growing up. We had 400 head of mules at the beginning of the war, and we had to castrate them, and we would have to throw them down, and those old mules were wild, and we would rope them and then put a rope around their neck. I mean, let the rope be. We had 2 ropes what we had, and one was around their neck on the right side and one on the left side, and we would just work them around till they got their legs on the inside of those 2 ropes, and then we would pull the ropes back in their hocks, you know, that part of their leg right there before their hoofs would kind of go in there with their, and then we would yank on that and pull their hind legs out from under them and throw them down. Then we had to tie them, hog tie them, and then we'd castrate them and put kind of a willow, slide the bark back and cut it out a little way so we could put their where their testicles were tied on with. We would put that in these 2 halves of this willow and then slip the bark back upon there so it wouldn't bleed.
Huh.
And so we had to do all that with each one of those 400 head of mules.
400.
Then when they got all healed up well, we sold them to the army for pack animals in Italy when they were going up those mountains in Italy. So that was, and we would rope and brand cattle and have cattle drives, and it was just like the Wild West. We had all that stuff. My brother and I would break every horse just about that was broken in that county where we lived, because we were young and most of these old guys were getting up in years, and even the younger guys that were grown and had horses, they just didn't want to.
They had sense.
They just didn't want to get bucked off, and so they could pay us, and we needed that because when we would work for another farmer, like we'd go run his tractor or something, and he would pay us maybe $1 a day or something. It wasn't much of a wage, but then that money I gave to my dad for the groceries and stuff like that. But he said, "You guys can keep this money you make from breaking these horses because you're the ones getting bucked off." So that's how we made our spending money. If we wanted to go on a date later on in high school and take a girl to the movie, that's what we used for that.
Sure.
And we got bucked off a lot of times, but we would have a lot of fun riding them. It was a real sport for us.
So how did you get involved with the Marine Corps?
Well, and I was just a young high school guy. I saw a deal in Life magazine, and it was a full-page picture at the Marines at Tulagi, there at Guadalcanal. And they were floating in the water, and those guys looked tough, and I just thought, that's what I want to be a part of, where the action is. And you know, you felt, man, I can handle this. And so from that time on, my brothers, I had 3 brothers in the Navy, and then my brother-in-law joined the Army, and I had 2 brother-in-laws in the Army. And I wanted to be a little different than them, so I thought, I'm going to join the Marine Corps. So when I graduated from high school in 1943, I graduated one night and caught a train the next day to Denver to the recruiting station, and I enlisted in the Marine Corps at the old Customs building in Denver. It's still there. There's a big ramp that goes up in the middle of that building, and I remember going up there in that Marine Corps station wagon, and I went out there and had my parents' permission to do it, and then when I got done, they sent me back home to get my parents to sign this thing, and I went back home and caught the train back again and got sworn in, and they told me to go on back and they'd call me. They'd shoot me a letter and tell me they wanted me to report for duty. So I went back, and that summer I worked in the harvest fields, and we would have, my brother and I both had a separate team of horses apiece there that we would have hitched onto a hay rack. And it was a wagon frame with a larger box and kind of no sides on it at all, or else just low sides on it. And we would use that to thrash. And when you thrash, we would use an instrument called a binder. And we would go in a field when it wasn't quite ripe yet. And the reason we did this, because if we did get a rain or a hail, it would beat this wheat or barley or oats or whatever we were get down on the ground, and then we would lose it all. So we would bind it, and then the binder cuts this stuff off, has a big reel that goes around like this. It pushes it back into the machine that's cutting it, and had a sickle down there cutting it off as you're going along. And it would land it on a canvas, just all nice and straight with the heads racing. And then the canvas would be moving, and it would take it up to another canvas and move on in and elevate it up a ways, and then roll over and then go into a deal that we called a knotter. And what it was, had some arms on it that kind of caught the grain and measured how many pieces of straw was going to go in there by just the bulk. Mm-hmm. And then this binder had a knotter on it, and it had, I don't know if you know what binder twine is, but binder twine is kind of a rope, like one strand of a rope, and it's kind of flares out all over it, but it's just about like one strand of that, but it's very, very tough. And that old binder, we'd have that, it'd come in a big roll like this, and as that bundle came into the binder, this old knotter had a little couple fingers on it, kind of, and it would just kind of grab a hold of it and tie right a knot. It's amazing. And then it would have the thing that cut it off, and then it threw it out into a kind of a rack on the binder that carried it a little while. Then we'd get 3 or 4 of those bundles on a deal, and then the guy riding the binder would dump it with his foot. He would take and push a thing with his foot, and he would dump this little rack carrying these bundles, and it'd leave them in a pile. So when he got all done, he'd have a bunch of little piles all along the field, all over. And then the next day, we would have to come out and what we call shock them. We would take and grab them by that cord that's wrapped around that bundle of wheat straw, and we'd take them and put them up side by side and kind of prop them up, till they kind of made like a wigwam. And we'd make shocks all over the field. And you've seen these pictures of shocks in the field.
Right.
Very picturesque thing.
Right.
And then the sun would ripen this fruit, this wheat that wasn't really all ripe, but the hail and rain didn't hurt it any, because these shocks would just let the water just shed right off of them, and it wouldn't hurt it. And so before we got ready to harvest it, we had a threshing machine pull in there, and he was probably some guy that's all he did, is go around and thresh people's grain. This wasn't the same as what we call a combine, but it was a big old machine with a great big old pipe on it. And that old pipe would screw around and spout out of here, and when we thrashed, why, it had a long trough in the front that we would set up on there that they'd pull along behind the thrash machine when we were moving it, and it was driven by a great big old long belt about 50 yards out to the tractor, and it went to the pulley on the tractor, and the tractor would take that big old long belt and starter going, and it was 50 foot between the tractor and the threshing machine, and had this long trough affair that strung out there and stood on a couple wheels on kind of a little framework there that held it up. And then we would take these hayrack wagons we got, and we would go out in the field, and we'd have what we call spike pitchers. All they did is stand out there and wait for us to get there, and we would pull out to where the end of the field, start out there, and then just work in towards the thrash machine. The thrash machine would pull in kind of in the middle of the field, and we would load this wagon with these bundles, and then we would take the horses and drive that wagon up to the thrashing machine and alongside of this long trough and pitch these bundles in there, and it had a belt-driven thing too and you'd throw these bundles in, and they would just run on a belt up to the front of the thrashing machine, and a big old bunch of forks would be standing there grabbing them and pulling them into the cylinder, which is rolling around and rubbing this heads of grain against a rubber thing, and not bruise up the wheat or anything. It would rub there and then shell it off of the wheat, and then it would let that sift down into another pipe, and it had little cups on it, and it would grab that grain and take it around, and also all of the chaff that was coming off, the little shells of this stuff that comes off of wheat, if you're familiar with that, or oats or anything. And they'd run this through a blower, and it would blow all that chaff away and blow it out the side or to a grate back in the back, and that grate had kind of shake all the time, so that the good seed that got by there would kind of fall down through there as that was shaking, and then it would kind of work its way over to another auger that would take it up to a bin and put the nice clean wheat or whatever into a bin. And when that bin got full, well, we'd have a truck there, and he would haul it away to the bin, to the elevator, to the farmhouse, or the bin we had there for the grain. And the straw would blow out the back out of that big old pipe and make a great big old straw pile. See these big old piles of straw. And then that straw we would use, it'd still have a little grain in it, maybe here and there, and it was even good feed for cattle and horses to eat. But we use it for bedding, to put out in their stalls so they could lay down in a nice, clean, dry, straw-laden stall, or a cow barn where we would milk the cows, and in the chicken houses where we had chickens, we'd put that in the chicken houses and use that straw all kinds of ways. We'd use that straw. And
So you're doing all this while you're waiting for the letter.
I'm doing all that while I'm waiting for my letter. And
So this is what, August, September?
no, it was during July and June and July, usually
Okay.
in
During the
August
summertime, okay.
and
Of
September.
43.
Yeah.
Okay, so when does the letter come?
Letter came the 23rd of September for me, and I remember getting really excited, man. I was going to be shipping out, and I'd hardly been out. I'd been to Denver once for a wedding for my sister, but I'd never been out of the state of Kansas or anywhere. We never, in this little town, didn't even have I'd never seen a stoplight before, for instance, a stop and go light. And we were really excited about getting out of here. And my brother, in the meanwhile, he had joined the Navy, and my other two brothers had joined the Navy, gotten drafted. They got drafted, but the brother just older than me, he joined up with what they call a V-12 program that sent you down to a college, and they had you in a college here for so many months, and you were to become a pilot or an officer on a ship. And he went to Texas Christian, and I flunked all my courses, so I didn't get to enter anything. Like, they wouldn't take me. I didn't have enough know how to even get in college at that point. But anyway, I wanted to be something different anyway. I wanted to join the Marine Corps anyway, so I joined the Marine Corps, and they sent me the letter, and I went out, and they had sworn me in before, but I got this letter and had my tickets in there. They were Pullman tickets on the Santa Fe train coming from Chicago to Denver to down into Mexico and over the pass down there at where 25 goes over that pass. I can't remember that pass now, but anyway, it goes up this pass, and I was sleeping in this Pullman car, and we were going up. It was jerking like this, and I had a hard time staying up there in my bed. It kept taking me down to the feet. I remember, but it was all exciting because I'd never done anything like that before, and I would sit there and we went through the Indian reservations of Mexico and Arizona and those areas. Man, I was all eyes. And we were on that for 2 or 3 days and got into Los Angeles, and in front of the depot was a great big old lawn in Los Angeles. And there was a whole regiment of Marines, it looked like, out there. I don't know how many were now, but I'm just estimating that what it was because it looked like